Hi everybody and welcome back to Enjoy English with Mrs. A. I'm Mrs. A and today's video is incredibly special because this is my very first ESL teacher training video. Since many of you have asked, I decided to do a series of teacher training videos, so I'm very excited to get this started. And before we jump into business, allow me to tell you a few things about myself. I've been an ESL teacher in Spain for the past 12 years. I've been working as a university teacher. I am the proud author of some English textbooks and fiction novels, and I couldn't be more excited to share all this with you today. If you're thinking about taking on the most beautiful and rewarding job in the world, which is of course teaching, there are a few things that you should know beforehand. Today we're going to focus on what to do on your first day of class. So whether somebody hired you to tutor their kids or you've just started working with an academy, here are some very important guidelines. Get yourself a planner, whether you're app friendly or paper friendly. This is going to help you get organized, and it's necessary because you're going to have so many groups, so many students, so many things to do and keep track of that it's absolutely necessary. Even if the academy you're working with or the clients who hired you want you to work with a specific textbook, you must try and personalize that class as much as possible, focusing on your students' weak points and strong points and polishing those areas that actually need polishing. Here's what I do if I have the freedom to structure the class the way I see fit. When I usually get a call from a client, I try to profile that future class from the get-go and get a feel of what they want to prepare. With kids, it's usually school follow-up with a focus on conversation, and parents want classes that are a bit more dynamic and give them the confidence to express themselves, given that they don't really have this time at school when they have to share a class with 25 other students. Teens and adults usually request official exam preparation classes such as Cambridge, TOEFL, IELTS, or simply conversation classes where the teacher can focus on their pronunciation and boost their fluency. Whatever your future students want to focus on, you need to touch base from that very first phone call. Never, and I cannot stress this enough, under any circumstance you should go to class empty-handed. Never, ever. You cannot wing it. There needs to be respect for your profession and for your students at all times. First off, and if this is home tutoring, I usually like getting there 15 minutes early so I can have a little meet and greet with the students and the parents and get to know them a little bit before we jump right into business. And I definitely don't charge for arriving 15 minutes early on my first day of class. It's common courtesy and I like to do so. I really like to meet them beforehand, shake hands, speak a little bit. And I think the students appreciate this approach. If this is an academy class, of course it doesn't work like this. But whenever I do home tutoring, this is my very own protocol. When I do finally sit down with my students, I like to go over these questions in detail. When was the last time you studied English? What are your weak and strong points? Is there any particular area you'd like me to insist on? This is the whole point of personalized education. Making sure you tailor that course according to your students' needs and preferences. Step 2 is what I like to call a mini interview, where I ask my students questions like, what are some of your hobbies? What do you like watching on TV? What are some topics that might interest you? And here you have such a lush variety. I don't know, cooking, bodybuilding, reading, world trivia, politics. You have a plethora to choose from. And that's when you open your planner and take notes of everything, because you want to make sure you hit that nail on the head and focus exactly on what they want. Especially at the very beginning of your course, focusing on topics that get your students hyped is a great way to get them on board and make it dynamic and interesting for them, because the last thing they want is another boring English class. The interesting thing here is that while they're pouring their hearts out and they're telling you all about their likes, their dislikes, their favorite things, you'll be able to assess their skills and figure out if they need extra help regarding prepositions, or if their sentence structure needs revising, their syntax, their pronunciation, and you can integrate tips in your future lesson plans. I have to tell you that I teach English in Spain. I've been here for 12 years and I speak the language But oftentimes my students don't even know I speak Spanish, and this is because I really want them to make an effort. I don't really like it when they rely so much on Spanish, so as much as I can, I'll try to explain things in English until I make sure they understand at least 99% of things. For the remaining 1%, we have word reference and we use it. After we finish our little interview, and not during, I usually like to give them a little bit of feedback based on their speaking. Also, my advice to you is to always keep it positive and encouraging. So I usually tell my students, guys, I love the way you express yourselves. I love that you are open with everything. You are not afraid to speak. But I notice there's still a little drama in the preposition department, and I'll make sure to bring you exercises and insist on certain things that I've noticed during our future lesson. This is a great way to let the students know, I notice what you're doing right, but I also notice your weak points and we're gonna work on them. One of the most important aspects of teaching is creating an environment where they feel accepted, where communication is encouraged, and you give them the wings and motivation to launch themselves into a conversation without being eclipsed by self-doubt or the feeling that they're not good enough. Motivate your students, pat that back, make sure you highlight what they're doing right, and keep it as positive as you can. If this is your first class, you can go all Godzilla on them and correct all their mistakes, but only the most prolific ones. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you correct their mistakes? When do you correct them? Do you interrupt them? Do you just wait for them to speak and then correct them? This is a little bit of a personal choice in the ESL industry, but I'm going to tell you how I do it. I personally address the mistake as soon as I hear it. So I let the student obviously make the mistake. I don't interrupt them as they're speaking, but immediately after they said it, I correct it. Because I want them to be 100% aware of how, when, and where that mistake slipped through. Whereas if I wait until they finish a whole sentence, they might lose the freshness of the mistake, the awareness of it. If as teachers, we would correct everything coming out of their mouth, we would not let them speak and they wouldn't assimilate everything. So when you do correct them, focus on key mistakes. Focus on the big picture, because ultimately what you want to do as a teacher is give them the wings to fly, especially when dealing with lower levels. What we really want here is for them to become comfortable speaking and have that confidence to move forward instead of holding on to that self-consciousness language-wise. And because our first class must feel like a class and not like a language exchange, I usually bring my very own lesson plans. Now, there are websites for ready-made lesson plans, and I'll do a whole other video on those. For example, Breaking News English or One Stop English. But usually I create my own lesson plans to suit the age and level of my students. And on the very first day, I bring a lesson on culture shock people experience while visiting other countries, or superheroes if I work with kids. In any case, I would pick a lesson that is quick to invite debate and conversation. We would start with a short reading on our topic, and then I'd probably pair them up and ask them to write 3 questions for their partner. This way I can assess their writing skills just a bit and also add a prompt on how to introduce your opinion while speaking. Pick your exercises taking into consideration the cognitive development of your students. And never spend 30 minutes doing the same thing. It's boring. As a teacher, you are in charge of the classroom management and dynamics, so make it fun. Tutoring actually gives you the freedom to do so because you're not following a syllabus, but personalizing that course the way you see fit. However, as always, there are guidelines to follow. A typical mistake every newbie makes is trying to fit way too much information in a 1-hour class. I understand, I've been there, done that, it didn't work. Learning how to dose the information you're feeding those hungry minds so they don't overdose on it is something you'll master with time and experience. More than the quantity of information you provide, what is really important is recycling that vocabulary within the same lesson. Meaning, don't try to teach them 50 new words and 20 new expressions in a lesson. That's overkill. Instead, try teaching them 5 words and 1 or 2 expressions and have them use that information and recycle that information in several contexts. Interesting fact, students are also going to be curious about you, your life, your background, your preferences, and you might tend to relax if there's not a significant age gap between you and your students. But please remember, at all times, our job as educators is walking the straight and narrow. This is your first class. Keep your speech politically correct. Don't ask anything that might be considered too personal. And by all means, do not bring controversy to the table. Keep your religious and political preferences out of your first class. You will have plenty of time to discover how far you can stretch with your groups, but try to do so honoring your profession. An important tip for you right here. Always keep in mind your students are the stars of the show. While you may be in charge of directing how the show goes, they should always be center stage. The class should always be about them and not about you. And remember, even if you're a newbie and you're about to start your first class, your students are likely to be more nervous than you will ever be. So they won't actually smell the fear on you. And before we call it a day, maybe during that very first class, you'll also experience the misfortune of being asked something you don't know the answer to. Don't fret, I'm going to share a little secret with you. If students ask you something that you don't remember the answer to, for example, don't let that show. Instead, reply, "Oh, that's an excellent question. We'll speak about this during our next class." For speaking and vocabulary practice, consider buying my book. It's very interactive for both you and your students. And if you're thinking about applying for a job in Spain, enjoyenglish.es. Also for the ones of you looking for English classes, enjoyenglish.es. This is the webpage of my teacher friends. They're all incredible. Check them out. They also post a lot of free material on their website for both teachers and students. So yeah, I'm trusting you'll have a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being with me today, and tune in for more ESL training videos. Bye!